this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. I have early memories as a child of my mother going through the house with lemon fresh Pledge, wiping down all of the surfaces, everything. We always had a piano in the house, by the way, so, you know, that is going to be at the top of the list for her. My mother taught piano for years. But that smell has always stuck with me. And now when I see something that's dust covered, I often think, wow, you know, wish I had a can of Pledge. Could wipe it down, remove the dust. Many times, though, the deposition of dust tells us a lot about a place or an object. It's an indication that time has in fact passed. Today, we're going to talk about the deposition of dust, dirt, and grime. Things you might see, for instance, on the side of a street where a car has been abandoned, or maybe in an impound lot. But the thing about it is, the dust outside never quite reveals, sometimes, the horror that is found within. Coming to you from the beautiful campus of Jacksonville State University, I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Well, it's all the rage right now, Dave. I can't turn on my computer or look at my phone without what we're about to discuss being the top line in the news. You know, we've had a lot of busy news the last couple of weeks, but this thing keeps popping up, this case, and the more it pops up, I don't know which character was it that it said, oh, it was Alice in Wonderland. It just gets curiouser and curiouser, because, you begin to think about this pop star, David,
right.
Who has got this car that has been found abandoned and subsequently put into a lot. And all of a sudden, somebody caught a whiff of something.
Well, I want to go to the timeline. Now, we're talking about a 15-year-old girl, Celeste Rivas Hernandez, who is identified as the body, and I want to get into the idea of being dismembered, but a 15-year-old missing girl, reported missing over a year and a half ago, and that's why it's all the rage, because you've got a 15-year-old girl dismembered, found in the trunk of a Tesla that was abandoned on the side of the road by a fairly new musical artist who goes by, we say David, but it's spelled D4vd. And it is a shocking, I don't know any other word that actually really fits, Joe. Shocking. An artist, a 20-year-old new artist who is out on his first world tour promoting his first album, when a very expensive car that is registered to him in Texas under his real name, David Anthony Burke, is just abandoned on the street. That's bad enough. Think about it. At 20 years old, how much does a Tesla cost? Over $100,000, right?
Yep. Yeah, and depending upon bells and whistles and the model, I think.
Do you think some of those bells and whistles are going to come into play in this?
Yeah, I think they will. I have to. I have to think, because I got to tell you, we were just having a discussion before we started, Brother Dave, and I was thinking about the technology that's at our disposal.
Right.
And I'm talking in real broad terms right now, so give me a little rope here. it's like I'm an old death investigator, forensics guy, and now even the things that I've seen over the course of my life as working in forensics and being around really bright people. I don't necessarily count myself as a really bright person compared to some of the folks I know. I've just kind of hung around, like you say, as a hair in a biscuit that can't get rid of me. But we're in a whole different world, brother. When you think about technology, how many cases have you and I covered on body bags just in the year 2025 so far? And in our catalog since January, where some kind of new technology has come into play. And, I think about Tesla. Tesla is one of those things where the vehicles, whether you like EVs or not, it is getting to the point where it's iconic in the sense that it's a marker in time for the state of our technology. It's representative of a lot of stuff. Everything from a smart car to something that doesn't run on a gas combustible engine. You think about Musk, going to the moon, and when you ride in one of the things, which I've had an opportunity to ride in several of them that have been Ubers, you can't hear the thing. And it's, there's all these screens and all these sorts of things that are contained therein. A guy like me, I don't want to speak out of turn for you, but, I would imagine you the same. We sit in here and, and I have to think, now I kind of feel like, one of those people that back in the early 1900s that had been riding buckboards their entire life, suddenly got into an automobile, and they were like, wow, how is this even possible? And we were kind of like in that. And so this is a marker in time. It's a marker in crime science too. Right. Because I don't know if you recall this. I don't want to give anything away too far, but I'll put it to you this way. And you and I had a planning meeting over the phone, and I mentioned this, and you said you remembered at the time. Do you remember when the Idaho murders took place? One of the questions they were asking, were there any Teslas around? Mm-hmm.
And I wondered why.
I didn't understand it. I didn't, because it's so out of my depth. Yeah. I didn't understand, because they're like these little sentries, that are out there. Not in a numerical sense. I mean, like Sentry, Sentry. Right. You're sitting there and they're watching. They have these sensors. So I don't know. For me, it's a brave new world, and the fact that this automobile actually plays in to this story that involves this individual, and you got to tell a story for all of our friends, but a kid that has risen up through technology.
Right.
You've been in radio forever, and you understand the guts of the music industry. Guys, listen, let me tell you something about my friend here. He can tell you more. He's forgotten more stuff about the famous rock stars and pop stars and country stars and Christian stars, all these people that have walked through the studio with him there and how the music industry works. I sit here, I could listen to him for hours. And this is a new world, Dave. Yeah. This is a new world that we've entered into.
It is.
Please, if you don't mind, please impart your knowledge about this, because I'm out of touch with it.
It is so weird that my grandson, Braylon, is the reason I know, or actually it's the reason I started learning what was taking place within the music industry, because gaming has been a big part of entertainment since, the early 80s, really, when you got the first home game consoles. But the computer generation of games that has grown to where it is interactive online now, using games such as Fortnite as the example here, you have people that record themselves playing Fortnite, and they post it on YouTube, and they show they're actually talented at being entertaining, talking about what they're doing in the game and how they're doing it and what they're trying to accomplish. And those, like my grandson, he's watching, and learning how to get these things. And it's a fascinating thing the game is.
Right.
And there, it happens with, right now we have so many of these so-called YouTube celebrities who built their careers on gaming channels, which is them playing a game and showing you tricks and things like that. Well, this guy, David Anthony Burke, he became a Fortnite aficionado online. He starts playing the game. He still is a gamer at heart, but he actually built his entire music career because he was making, please remember, he's only 20 now. Only 20 now. A couple of years ago, he was releasing these videos of him playing Fortnite on YouTube, and he was making money. But he got demonetized because he was using music that he didn't own, that was popular music he was using in his videos, in his tutorials, and in his entertainment. And you can't do that without paying rights fees for it. So if Joseph Scott Morgan and I record a song that you really like and you include it in your videos, you're going to lose. You're going to get demonetized because you don't have the rights to use that song. That's the way it is. Now, that happened to David Anthony Burke. So he's fussing with his mother. Now, he's living in Houston. He was born in the Bronx. This is important because a lot of people are saying he's from New York. He is not from New York. He was born and raised in New York. He is from Houston, Texas, which, by the way, is where this Tesla was registered. David Anthony Burke. But David Anthony Burke's mom, she gets tired of hearing him fussing about not making any money with his YouTube videos anymore. And she says, why don't you just make your own music to put on your videos? And he actually says, okay. He downloads an app to his iPhone and boom, he's creating his own music and lyrics and everything and putting it on his Fortnite videos. And people liked it. He found, and this is a guy without any musical training. So we've been told. It's an incredible story. So out of being demonetized, his mom tells him, make your own music. He does. It becomes successful. It goes viral on YouTube. And then he goes to TikTok where it explodes. And that is what led to where, in terms of his career, where he recorded and released his first album in April of this year. And he's now out on a world tour that just started with that album that began as a way of making money on his Fortnite YouTube videos. So that's where it began. That's where he came into the money. And that's why I told you earlier, think about the money this young guy was making on these platforms, YouTube, TikTok, what have you, that he could buy a Tesla. And by the way, not just buy a Tesla, but rent a $20,000 a month home in the Hollywood Hills.
I can't even fathom
and then
that. Yeah.
Leave this Tesla abandoned is how it was reported. Abandoned on the road right in front of the house, on the street. He just leaves it parked there and goes out. It's like,
well, I got to tell you, if I'm living in a neighborhood and it is populated with structures that, at least for his, I'm sure he doesn't have the biggest house there, and you're asking $20,000 a month for rental. I got questions when there's an abandoned car in the middle of the road or on the side of the road, because aesthetically, when I'm coming home and I'm paying out all that jack, I got to tell you, man, I ain't pulling up to see jalopies abandoned on the side of the road.
Even if it is a Tesla.
Yeah, even if it is a Tesla, I don't care.
Right.
If I'm paying that kind of money to live in the neighborhood, I want to know, why is this dirty car, sitting out here on the road?
And that's what happened. That's actually what happened.
I'm no fan of what do they call these things, HOAs. I live out in the country, so I don't know. I hear these horror stories. I'm no fan of that kind of thing. But I got to tell you, if you're in that atmosphere, people are going to start to ask questions, even in a big city, where people ignore one another. You don't know who your neighbor is.
Right. They did. And they actually did get tired of it. And after a couple of weeks, we're guessing anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks of that car sitting there, neighbors had enough. And they called and had it towed away. The car was taken to the impound lot on September the 3rd. And after a couple of days in the impound lot, they're going, man, something really stinks out here. And they being the employees, start looking. Where's the smell coming from that Tesla? Now, the trunk is in the front. And a quick look inside, they didn't see anything. But when they popped the trunk, they saw everything, I guess, in a bag.
Yeah. And that's the horror of this. Because as talented as this young man is, as gifted as he appears to be with bringing in the dough, it really makes you wonder, were there any 12 or 13-year-old girls listening to his music that may have developed an affection for him? Celeste Rivas, she would be 15 chronologically. She'd be 15 right now, okay, if she were alive. But Dave, big reveal here, she ain't. That's been scientifically verified by the medical examiner out in Los Angeles County. We know who the body is, or who the body belongs to, who this person is. I
got to ask you about this, Joe, because when, again, just going to the meat and potatoes here, a car is labeled abandoned on a street, on a residential area. The neighbors call it in. It is towed to an impound lot. After a couple of days, the stench attracts flies or whatever, and they go look. And inside the trunk of the car, they find a bag containing a person. So they call police, Joe. Now, when police arrive on the scene at the impound lot, what is the process going to be when they arrive to this rancid smell? Because you know what, Joe, it could be a dog in the car or in the bag and a mannequin. Sure. You know, it could be any number of things.
Let me tell you something. It could be somebody that forgot their groceries. That happens. You know, you go through the frozen food aisle.
Yeah.
I've walked into houses with decomposing bodies of people that died immediately after getting back from the grocery store, and they left the groceries out on the table in the kitchen. They just brought them in. I remember one case in particular where a person obviously had an a heart attack, and they died in the hallway after having brought the groceries into the house, and the groceries were rotting there along with the body, which is decomposing down the hallway. So you never know, what's going to be there. But I got to tell you, you're walking around and that you get a whiff of that. And like I've said before, previously, you're going to have questions relative to, what's the source of this?
Right.
Why is this happening, man? Why is it happening?
And, the first news that came out was, okay, police have found the body of a female in this Tesla. And it did not take long before, again, it is an expensive car, a Tesla, and it's found in the Hollywood Hills. So TMZ, the website, they're all over it, and they are right on the cusp of finding out who owns this car, who is it registered to. So before we knew who this individual was in the car, we knew that the Tesla was registered in Texas to David Anthony Burke, who goes by the name David, spelled D, the number 4vd. So this artist, David, the car is registered to him, and police are investigating the body. Now, what do they do, Joe? Because we know the odor has overtaken the lot. I've seen the yellow tape, around the cars, and the vehicle is being searched. What method are they going to use? What takes place? I'm guessing they don't just grab the bag and throw it in a car and take off. No, you would never do that. You have to be very purposed and planned when you're entering into this process. The car itself is a crime scene. It's certainly a death scene. All right. Okay. Now, I can't say the crime has been committed, that an actual homicide has been committed in the car. You don't know that, but you have to. I've never actually heard you say that before. A crime scene and a death scene, but they are two different things. They are because
first off, let's just say that you had an intact body that was found in the car. All right. It doesn't make it a homicide scene. There are people that die in cars every single day. It just, they die motor vehicle accidents, or they die of some kind of natural disease. And people need to remember, just on a little aside here, people need to remember the number one killer in America is heart disease. It's not all these traumatic things that you hear about. So think about how, just reflect, my friends out there, about your loved ones or somebody that suddenly succumb, and they weren't traumatized. They weren't shot or stabbed or beaten. They may have been to the grocery store. They may have been out walking the dog. They may have been over at their child's house, holding the grandbabies, and suddenly they clutch their chest. People die in all kinds of places. So yeah, there's a difference between a death scene and a crime scene. Crime scene implies that, obviously, goes without stating, I guess, but obviously that, there has in fact been a violation of a law here. In this particular case, I can guarantee you, when they opened up that trunk and they verified that you had, we'll go ahead and say it, a dismembered human remain in there. Well, this scene actually becomes the primary scene, because in our world, if you have a dead body, wherever the corpus delicti is, that is the primary scene. Okay. And then everything else radiates out from that. Now, you've got a lot of locations involved here, Dave. I mean, you really do. There's all kinds of secondary scenes, and you got a ton of what are referred to as tertiary scenes too. So you think about a secondary crime scene. Well, the first thing I'm thinking about is a domicile. The owner of this car, where does he live? Well, we know he lives in the Hollywood Hills. Where was the car found? Well, it was out on the curb. Well, he's got a garage. Why wasn't this car parked in the garage? Because when they opened the garage at his house, well, I'll be doggone, there's another Tesla in the garage. So, when you think about this, why in the world would you take a car that has a dismembered human remain in it and park it on the street? Who has knowledge? I think the big question is, who has actual knowledge of this? I'm not saying there's a perpetrator. I'm just saying, okay, the first person I'm going to is David. All right. I'm going to have a question for you.
Sure.
When's the last time you operated this vehicle? Is the vehicle operational? Is there a problem with it? Do you commonly park your car on the street? Is this something that you normally do? And that car in and of itself, is going to provide a lot of information relative to when it was placed on the street, perhaps through biometrics, because you have to operate the vehicle. So it's going to give you an idea as to who logged into this thing and put it there. Who's the last person to get out of that vehicle? Is it sophisticated enough to give you that specific identifying information? This is a question we've never had before, Dave, relative to Teslas. I don't recall a case like this. I've seen Teslas burning up on the side of the road as a result of rioting and all that stuff, but I've never seen a Tesla, and I know I can be proved wrong here, but I personally have yet to cover a case where a Tesla is involved in a homicide.
Right,
it's just
like
not
this.
something, like this. I don't know.
There's a couple of things in this show that where the Tesla is parked on the street, as we mentioned a few minutes ago, from 3 to 5 weeks. It's there, and long enough, as you mentioned, that you'd get irritated driving home in your neighborhood, and this car is sitting in the same spot, not being moved.
Right, yeah.
And we've got, building the timeline. We have neighbors saying it was, let's just go with 4 weeks. And then they tow it to the impound lot, where after a couple of days, the odor is so strong they call police. They look in and then call police. But the wording of dismembered body.
Yes.
If this, and we will get into the victim here because we want you to know who she is, but just hang in there for just a minute. The mechanics of this, the body is in that vehicle for an extended period of time.
Yes.
Is it possible for the body through normal decomposition to appear as if the body was dismembered while it was in the bag from conditions being, I mean, talking about summertime in LA here. Is that possible that the body was not dismembered, but only appeared dismembered because of decomposition?
No, this information is coming from the coroner. So when in my world, if you use the term dismembered, that means that's an action word. We're going to dismember something, okay? And in order to dismember something, tools have to be involved. This is not, you're not just merely pulling a body apart, okay? You're talking about, you're talking about getting some type or types of instruments in order to perform this act and parse this body out. I'm going to be very blunt with you. And Lord knows you and I have done our time relative to dismemberments, over these years talking about these cases. But Dave, one of the most essential things I've come to understand, it was reinforced to me yesterday, as a matter of fact, at Jack State, I'm surrounded by, kids that are, they're in their early 20s. They know the singer. Mm-hmm. And this came up in conversation yesterday. And, in class, I think it was my intro to forensics class that I teach here to like sophomore. It's like a sophomore level class. And we just had this dismemberment conversation, saying, look, what's required? You need power. If you're going to use power tools, you're going to have access to hand tools. If it's something that's kind of, personally driven by it, a hacksaw or something like that. If you're using a sawzall, you have to have AC current, or you have to have a charging station for the battery. You have to have privacy. You have to have time where you can take your time to do this, because if you're going to particulate a body, most people that have never engaged in any kind of butchering at all don't know where the weak spots of the body are. They always stop and start. They get frustrated in one area. They don't know if they're going to go to the joints. Most of them, I've seen tons of these cases where people will try to, use a saw and go directly through mid shaft to the femur, through tissue, to the bone. And it's impractical. I mean, you can do it, but you have to have a steadiness of mind. This is the other thing. A person that's never done this before and is not used to this kind of gore and this kind of horror, they have to press that down within them as they're, taking apart a body. I've always imagined, somebody that's doing a dismemberment that's never done it before, they stand up, get frustrated. They walk around for a little bit. Some of them probably weep while they're doing it. And they realize they're in way over their head, because they've chosen this course of action, try to get rid of a body. But if I can go back to something real quick, what does this tell us about a car that contains a body, a dismembered body, and this timeline? I'm really wondering, Dave, if this victim had not been dismembered for some time, maybe there was a foul odor associated with it. If the body was being stored somewhere else, trying to decide what to do. Oh, I got it. I'll take the body, I'll take the body and place it into a bag or bags, and I'll put it in the Tesla, and then I'll park it on the street. That way, when I'm somewhere where the body is being stored, I no longer have to smell it. you're trying to get separation, but you still want to be able to look out the window and see the car, or pass by the car and see the car, that it's still there, because that gives you an idea, of what's going on. What status is this in? Has anybody found her yet?
Wow. And then
I know. So I don't know. I got to thinking about this last night, and I'm thinking, all of the various, things that could have happened. How does this go down, Dave? Because it's not the fact that there's like a pop star involved. That's
right.
Weird enough.
Yeah.
But it's that the circumstances are so bizarre. I mean, they really are, even by today's standards, where there's so much bizarre stuff everywhere. This is really, really odd, man.
It is. And the part that I'm so glad you mentioned, that the pop star thing is not central to this. It is central to the story, because that's why the story is getting the type of play that it is. A 20-year-old singer on his first world tour, and all of a sudden this body is found. But here's the key. The body is that of a girl who is only 15 years old, who was
would be
15.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And she was reported missing in April of 2024 from Lake Elsinore, which is about 68 miles from the Hollywood Hills, south and east.
All right.
Okay. So as
South
you're in
and
LA,
east. Okay.
go south and a little bit east, and that's Lake Elsinore. And that's where the community she's from. And she was reported missing April 5th of 2024. Now, there's going to be a lot said about every aspect of this young girl's life and her family. I know that, and we're not going there today because she's dead, and we need to know who killed her and when. The why and the how are two different things that are not really,
right.
But we need to know, when was she killed and how? Because finding a dismembered body in the trunk of a Tesla on the side of the road does not tell us how she was killed or when.
No,
how are we going to figure that out, Joe?
Yeah, and that's the most important thing, because clues rest in, I think that some of the clues, Dave, at least for me, rest in her age. Because as you have said more eloquently than anybody I have ever come in contact with in the media, you told me this several years ago, and I have never forgotten it. You told me that if you are not an adult and you have sex with someone that is an adult, that ain't sex. That's rape and sexual assault. Anytime we have a very young person, Dave, that we cover on here, the big question I always have to ask is, what did a child, because she's 13 when she went missing. Okay. Yeah. What did a child do to somebody that would have them react with such a level of rage toward this child as to bring about her death and then desecrate her remains in death? Who out there would have this kind of level of anger? That's the big question, isn't it, Dave? You think about that. Who? I mean, I don't know. When you were 13, 14, when I was 13 or 14, I had problems with people I was growing up with. It might wind up in a scuffle. Whoever, who knows? But there's not a whole lot of people out there that are looking to murder a child of this age. I don't understand it. So I think our field gets narrowed down here pretty quickly.
I want to share something with you, because I went back and looked at the missing person flyer that was put up. Last seen Lake Elsinore, California, age 13. Gotcha. Her date of birth, September 7th, 2010. All right. When they put this missing person flyer out, she was described as 5'3", 120 pounds, brown hair, brown eyes. Last seen wearing gray pants and a black sweater, a hat, and Hello Kitty sandals. That's the little girl, okay?
Yep.
Go. 5'3", 120 pounds. I got the description of what they found in the car. 5'2", 71 pounds.
Well, before we go down this road, just let me.
Yeah, that's why I wanted you to break down how that's possible, because there's got to be an explanation for losing 50 pounds.
There is. And let me kind of explain this to you, and just brace yourself for what I'm about to say. All right, let's go to height. The height, they are measuring this body, and the way we measure bodies in the morgue is from heel to crown. So from the heel to the top of the head, all right? That's how bodies are measured. Now, what do we know about her, or what do we know about these remains? Well, it's pretty obvious. They've been dismembered. Is it possible to lose an inch of height during that? Yes, it is, because we don't know that you have all of the components. Let's just say that a quarter of an inch of bone drops out. When you're sawing through the bone, it becomes bone dust, and you're having to do this multiple times. It's not beyond understanding that, you would lose overall length or height of a body. That's pretty reasonable. But how do you get from 100 plus pounds down to double digits? Well, here's how it happens. She's been deceased for a while. She has literally been cooking in that car, or wherever other location she may have been prior to being placed in the car. Part of her remains after this amount of time with this much heat exposed to her, the body will take on a liquid quality. All right. And you're going to lose some of that weight. So if it's contained in a bag, you'll lose a lot of the body that has been reduced down. You've also got dehydration of the tissues. Remember, a lot of the weight that we carry in life is, in fact, water weight, and in death too. And just think about the ultimate dehydrator. Can you imagine being in a trunk in LA during the summertime? Just even if you were in that location, living inside of a trunk, you're a living person placed inside the trunk in the direct sunlight. You're going to lose maybe a couple of pounds just in water weight, because you're going to sweat it out. It's going to be like being in a sauna. How much more so where you've got constant exposure and decompositional breakdown? The cells are all collapsing now, and they become liquefied to a certain extent. You'll still have some tissue that remains behind. And this is one of the huge things here that I think is very important. With who is now positively identified as Celeste Rivas, they have ruled her death, her manner of death, as a homicide, but they still have yet to come up with a cause. Well, one of the reasons they don't have a cause, I think, at this point, is that there's been so many tissue changes within her that, let's just say, she's choked out. All right. That's a very personal thing where somebody's wrapped their hands around her throat. And then you give credence to this postmortem manipulation of the body. Those depended upon, and I have no knowledge of this. I'm just throwing the scenario out there. Let's just say you go to dismember the body. And one of the things that I have yet to have a dismemberment case that I've either covered or worked where they didn't go for the head first. That's generally how it works.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So if you're removing a head, that means that somewhere along the neck, you're going to have to go into that area with an instrument to separate it from the body. Well, because you're doing that, any kind of artifact that's in the neck, particularly when it's a long-term decomposition, can compromise the presentation. You can't rule in or rule out anything. The reason they're coming up with homicide as a manner, Dave, is that the question I think that you have to ask philosophically is, who in the world dismembers a 13 or, well,
yeah,
we don't know. She would be 15.
Right.
Who in the world would dismember her? So they're going to rule this as a homicide, but do we actually have evidence of specific homicidal trauma? Right now, the LA County coroner has not released any of that. I'm hoping that they will.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you this, when they finally removed those remains from that trunk, Dave, and I'm imagining the body, I'm imagining that they would have taken out each individual dismembered remain, like whether it's a foot, a lower leg, upper leg, head, and they're going to x-ray each one of those. And this is a messy, messy affair, by the way. This is not a standard kind of event, because you're dealing with tissue that's so degraded that it's got a real kind of oily, greasy feel to it. It's no longer in this kind of firm state that you have with fresh remains. And so they would x-ray every single thing. Why would they x-ray every single thing? Because, dude, you cannot just simply look at the tissue and say, aha, this is what brought about death. You've got to look internally in this horrible mass that's left behind with an x-ray to see, is there a bullet track? Do I have a lead storm? Which we'll see many times if somebody's shot. You'll see this kind of lead storm where the round particulates inside the body, and you can follow a trail. Are there any broken bones in here that are not associated with the act of dismemberment? I want to know if she's had her ribs broken, and we can delineate that. And the more you say, well, how do you know that wasn't as a result of dismemberment? Well, there are ways that you can actually examine the bone and tell if, at a microscopic level, you can actually tell if this is something that was in the antemortem or perimortem state while she's dying, as opposed to, he broke a rib while he was, trying to figure out how to use the Sawzall or the skill saw or the hacksaw or the limb saw or whatever it was that he used.
Now, wow, that's a lot to unpack. We are going to be revisiting.
To drown you in all that information. It's just my brain is kind of on overload with this case because there's so much here. I mean, this is a big mystery. Yeah,
it is, and I do want to address something because I think it's important. The family of Celeste Rivas Hernandez has acknowledged a number of things, and there are children missing in this country where mom and dad have no clue as to what happened. Their child is gone. This case is a little bit different. She was listed as missing, but the family had communication and contact with the neighborhood after the date she was listed as missing. The family knew. Now, think about this. This is a 13-year-old girl. And they knew she was in they're going to call it a relationship with this David, who was at least 18. Okay. He was over 18 years old, and he's with a 13-year-old at the time that he takes her to the movies, which is her brother's name is Matthew Rivas. He actually told NBC LA that the family was aware of the relationship. He claimed his sister vanished after being picked up by Anthony David Burke in his Tesla. He picked her up in the Tesla to go see a movie in May of 2024. Now, there are pictures and videos that I've seen with David and Celeste together, talking, communicating with one another in the same frame, okay, in the same TikTok video, both of them right there. So it wasn't that she was removed from her home and taken away without anybody knowing. Now, I don't know, and I don't know what we'll actually find out, but the reality here is that her brother is saying, we knew they were in a relationship. Now, most of us would say, allowing a 13-year-old to be involved with an 18-year-old, well, it's illegal if they're involved in sexual activity. As I've said before, that's rape. So we've got that. That's part of this discussion. But the bottom line is she's dead now, Joe. And
well, I can tell
she
you,
was far too young to make a decision to be with an adult.
Yeah, and the question that I'll always come back to is who's minding the store?
Right.
I want to know that question. Look, the world is full of predators.
Yeah.
We know that. We know it. It's evidenced every single day. We talk about ad nauseum. We talk about sex trafficking and missing and murdered children we know the world is full of predators. I want to know who is minding the store. Why is a 12 or 13-year-old child running the streets? I want an answer to that question, because you do not have the wherewithal developmentally at that age to make these kind of decisions. And even if this individual, this pop star, has nothing to do with her death, the fact that she is on the streets and no one actually knows where she is at any given time, that means she's being exposed to all potential dangers that exist out in the world that she's not sophisticated enough to understand. And now her body has been dismembered, packaged, and placed into the trunk of a dirty, abandoned car on the side of the road and taken to an impound lot. Friends, let me tell you something. There ain't enough Texas. I am going to find out more about this case, and I can promise you that myself and Dave Mack are going to have a follow-up on this, and we're going to have further discussion. There's going to be more forensics related to this case. We're going to find out. We're going to find out what the car reveals. And I'm not just talking about like electronically. I'm talking about what was going on in the cabin of that car. I'm going to want to know about DNA deposition within that car and within this house, which, by the way, at the time of this recording is being searched from stem to stern. They're executing search warrants on this house right now. I want to know about the other car in the garage. I want to know if Celeste's DNA is in both spots or in both vehicles. I want to know if her DNA is in that house anywhere. I don't care if it's the cupboard in the kitchen or if it's the bedroom, the bathroom. I don't care. We want to know. We want to know what essence of her life did she leave behind in these environments. And we're going to continue to search and see if LA County Coroner / medical examiner comes up with a specific cause of death. We need answers. We need answers to this case and all the cases out there involving children that are not protected, that are out there. Let's not let her death be in vain. Maybe, just maybe, this is a cautionary tale that somebody who needs to hear it will take heed of. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.